Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Steve Rice. He is a co-founder of the Globally Conscious Leader, and he helps people and organizations identify and focus on globally conscious core values to drive personal and business excellence. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you, Ajay. It is a privilege to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Steve. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about cultivating globally conscious leadership, how one can do that. But before we come to this, Steve, help us understand a bit about your background, your journey, so that people can know who they are listening to and also learn from your journey itself.
Okay. Well, I come out of the outdoor industry in America here, the world of Patagonia, North Face, and some of those bigger brands that, at least here in the United States, have made a name for themselves by being more environmentally conscious and business conscious and culturally conscious. And it's shaped a lot of how I think and how I go about managing businesses and helping others manage businesses. So the inspiration for the globally conscious leader was to find all those folks that I'm connected to in the outdoor industry who care about sustainability and care about international business and relations and supply chain and organizational excellence, and bring them into the globally conscious leader either as educators or mentors, so we can pass that information on to other people, especially youth, all over the world.
Absolutely, Steve. So leaders seem to be in a lot of uh, lot of work for the leaders nowadays, where leadership is in crisis because of the great resignation and quiet quitting and everything else. And then they are deciding whether they want to be heart conscious leadership or and so many other things. And amidst this you are talking about globally conscious leader. Firstly, help us understand who is a globally conscious leader. Should they be conscious about their own countries, like nationally conscious leadership? Because you see, in the war between Ukraine and Russia, a lot of companies took that stand for their own nations. And now you are talking about a globally conscious leader. In that backdrop, help us understand who is a globally conscious leader today, and then we'll come to the other questions.
Okay, thanks for the question. I think, from the globally conscious leader's perspective, everyone has the capacity to be a globally conscious leader. From the janitor all the way up to the CEO and the owner, you can make decisions that have long-term effects. Even if it's as simple as doing away with the really bad chemicals you're using to clean the floors, or maybe some of the now known toxic chemicals that have been used all over the world in farms and gardens and municipal lawns, everything. Choosing not to use those is a globally conscious decision, because everything we put into the environment is connected. And that connectivity piece is a major piece of what it means, we think, to be a globally conscious leader. We have a set of founding principles that we think businesses should have, and they include taking interconnectedness to heart, being kind, treat all people equally, respect life's journeys, and especially owning your externalities. And so, if you find out, just like as an example that everyone I think is going to agree with me, if you find out you're doing something in your business that is killing children in the next village over, you probably should stop doing that, right? So that's an externality that we don't want. If what you're doing is actually helping children eat better meals every morning, then that's an externality that we do want. So everyone's a globally conscious leader. And I do get this idea of, like, what about the nationalists, sort of in a positive way, like, let's support our local communities, right? Let's not do anything outside of our country. I think that's fine. At the same time, I'm aware that an American dollar here can go a long way in Nepal. And I can provide, as a business, a very good income for somebody in Nepal for less than I can provide an income here. And if you care about the planet, I think I care about people in Nepal just as much as I care about in my community as well, right? So that to me, that's a piece of the globally conscious leader too.
Absolutely. So, is it about organizations? Are organizations ready for this, or is it are these these sort of words about globally conscious leaders and the DEY or all those things, DEI and all those things, ESG? So many things have come up, and are struggling with in their own way. Do you
Yeah.
think this is one another sort of a new sort of a buzzword for organizations? You might be very true to this, but what about companies? They just adopt these words for one season, and another season it's a different sort of game altogether. Because see, when it was very comfortable to buy from China because it was very easy and cheaper, they were very fine with that. But as
Right.
soon as there is another perspective going on, then they are looking at all sort of problems, every in China and everywhere else. So whenever it suits, everything else is under the carpet. When it doesn't, then all this consciousness wakes up. Does consciousness work like this? If you have to really think about, the benefit of people involved that you are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Oftentimes, it's very easy to be, we don't have to call it unethical, but to let things slide because you think it's not a big deal and it's going to make you money. And certainly, like you could say that maybe American companies do that more than any other companies in the world. At the same time, I'm going to say like everybody is capable of good and everybody's capable of evil. In answer to the question, um, is it just another set of buzzwords? I'm going to say absolutely not, and here's why. I'm a very working class person. I do not have an MBA. I worked in retail. I waited tables to get through college. I wasn't poor, but I wasn't rich growing up. But I've always worked with blue collar working folks in factories and stores and whatnot around the United States. And I think that this idea that we have, which is using this communication framework called MOCA, which stands for motivation, opportunity, clarity, and ability, and establishing your core values and a non-arguable goal, it's not a acronym, and it's not something you sweep under the rug. It's actually it's hard work, don't get me wrong, but it's an easily implementable process that doesn't make assumptions about what the outcomes are going to be. So we're not experts on what organization you should go to prove that you're not putting PFAS into your garments that's then going into the ocean and then going back into fish and coming back into our bodies. We don't do that. It's your job as an organization to create a culture that actually understands what consequences you're having in the world. And that might include that this jacket costs too much, or it doesn't cost enough, or hey, turns out we're sourcing this from a factory in some country that is using child labor. Like, we need to be responsible for those things. And if you have an organization that's looking for those things, you're going to find them. If you have an organization that's not looking for those things, you're just not going to find them. So what we're saying is, to be a globally conscious leader, to even be a really good business person and have a business that people want to stay with and work at, you need to put processes in place that empower an excellence and organizational excellence in your company and in the people so that they stick around. Because there's plenty of studies out there that say, like, if your company sucks, people are going to leave. And if your company is great and it does good things and people feel good about themselves working there, people are going to come in and work for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's understand things on the ground.
Yes.
Is it that you have to go out and convince people, or companies are coming to you by themselves? How does this is this working on the ground?
Well, it tends to be self-attracting. There's definitely a subset of business leaders, especially in America because of the political climate, who won't come to us because they think we're woke. They'll use, terminology, neoliberal, whatever they call it. And all we're saying is, we're not political. We're saying, don't hurt your grandchildren with something you're doing. And it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. It doesn't matter what country you live in. It doesn't matter how old you are. Don't do things that are going to hurt your grandchildren. And by extension, don't hurt the grandchildren of the factory workers who are working with your third party vendor in some other country. Don't let them do that. So,
Right. Right. So let's forget the politics part of it, whatever one may think. But what stops companies from adopting sustainable ways of doing things uh, rather than jeopardize? Is it only about the cost, or is it more than that?
it's a lot more. There's a couple different things that I actually wrote them down. I'm going to look down here. One of them, I think we a lot of people want to be better. One of the main things is they don't know how to operationalize it. They don't know how to put something in place that allows them to be better. They're afraid that it's going to take a lot of resources and be really expensive. On top of that, they're afraid they're going to spend a ton of resources and maybe get some change. And this does happen quite a bit. For 3 to 6 months, everything's going to seem great, and then everyone's going to go back into their bad habits. And then we're worried that what we're going to find out is going to be too expensive to fix, and it's going to put us out of business, right? So, what we say to that is like, we're not saying that there's a bunch of expensive things that are going to happen. We're not telling you to be a particular brand of ethical or more. Or there's no morality specifically to this, in that no judgment, I should say. But our concept is that you have a non-arguable goal, and I don't know if are you familiar with non-arguable goals, Ajay?
I've heard about it. I don't know about it.
I think I was trying to think of the most simple example because I used to tell a long story. The doctors in America, and I don't know if this is the rest of the world, have to sign the Hippocratic Oath. And one of the very first sentences in that is, first, do no harm.
Okay.
That's a non-arguable goal.
Right.
Google used to have a non-arguable goal that said, do no evil. And they got rid of it a couple of years ago. Paul O'Neill at Alcoa, and this is probably the most famous story business people have heard, turned around Alcoa, and his number one argument, his number one non-arguable goal was 0 worker days lost to illness or injury. And this is like one of the largest aluminum factories and companies in the world. And people thought he was crazy. When he announced that, their stock tanked because everybody went out and sold it and thought he was nuts. But he ended up creating a huge turnaround, like 7 to 10x or something like that in 10 years. And his worker and safety days lost, worker days lost to injury and illness and calling in sick went way down. What he realized is that was a goal that would put into place a culture that valued the workers, who would then value the company, who would then provide value for the customers through all sorts of stuff. So if you're afraid of all those things, like, I get it. I'm afraid of all those things too. I'm afraid of it being too expensive. I'm afraid of finding things I don't want to find out. Gosh, I'd be sad to find out that something I was doing was hurting children somewhere, right? And I know I'm kind of using hyperbolic examples, but these actually happen every day. We don't quite realize it, right? And so the use of a non-arguable goal isn't to say that you have to fix every single thing right away and you have to basically run your company into the ground. What you need to do is need to get your head out of the sand, and you need to start listing all those things that you do find, all the externalities. So, and recognize who your stakeholders are. It's a lot about this. You asked about it, is always about money. If you're in a business that only cares about shareholders, it probably will be all about money. But if you care about stakeholders, then you actually care about your customers. You care about your employees. You care about the employees of your third-party vendors in other countries. You care about how that stuff gets here. You care about whether you're putting stuff in the river. You care about your waste. Everything changes. And I think you create a much higher value product, and your customers have a much higher value experience when you care about these things. And it's better for your grandchildren and your children.
Right. Right. A lot of these leaders, several of them are also founders and CEO. What stops them to take these decisions? A CEO, hired CEO, may have to take a lot of approvals for this. what stops these people who have already made a lot of money? Is it again about more and more money? I want to understand their mindset because they go and talk out in different forums all great things about thought leadership and making a better planet everywhere. Why is it so difficult on the ground? Is it that they don't want to understand, or it is too much of a problem for the brain to handle?
Maybe a little of both. I'm not sure I could speak to the value judgment of why they don't do it. I I know that in my experience, there are a lot of people that I talk to at every age who have a business, and they'll say, "Well, I'm going to make as much money as I can until I'm 50, and then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to do something good with it." And so they possibly have some of them have fairly destructive business models, with a lot of waste. They're not trying to get their waste into somebody else's supply chain. They're not measuring the effects of what they're doing. They're not even asking whether they should build something. Sometimes that's the most important thing is to say, we're not going to build that thing. Right. And that's a mindset that I just don't agree with. I can't tell you why they choose that. I know one kid in particular, great kid. He's about 30. He did that because that's what his dad did. And so he's like, okay, I got a role model. And But when you have a lot of money, it's easy to make decisions that are based on money. I mean, you could say that. I don't want to be skeptical and critical of rich people. I'm not one of them that has that kind of cash. But it is true that money can do a lot of things. At the same time, there's people with a lot of money who aren't doing a lot of things with that a lot of money, and I can't answer why
Right.
they wouldn't do that.
Right. But you can answer about yourself. Why are you doing all this, making so much of an effort in these times of, it needs so much of, effort to convince people just to do the right thing. How do you keep yourself motivated? Why do you want to take so much of trouble for yourself?
That's an excellent question, Ajay. I want to take a lot of the trouble because I've experienced bad management myself. Whether, like I said, waiting tables or working in an outdoor store, I was a rock climbing and mountaineering instructor and a fishing guide, and even as a youth, I was extremely aware of the difference between a good manager or owner, and a bad manager or owner. And I always had a fairly entrepreneurial spirit, and I promised myself that if I ever owned a business, which I also promised myself that I would have the kind of business that I would be proud to work at. And I've done that several times over. And while doing that, I've also come across companies who said, "Well, I'd like to actually have a business that my children are proud of. Can you help me do that? How do I do that?" And so, in a certain sense, a lot of my motivation comes from both good and bad experiences growing up, and but also I'm very inspired by the people who create value in a company. Getting back to those blue collar workers, folks who work in the shipping departments and in the manufacturing areas of facilities, they absolutely love what I bring to the table because I give them a voice. And that's often scary to leadership at first. When leadership realizes that they don't have all the answers and that quite literally many of the best answers are coming from the 172 people that work in the warehouse, not the 32 people that are in the offices, next to the warehouse, then they start realizing what operational excellence actually looks like, and what a teamwork actually looks like. And to
Absolutely.
okay, yeah.
Carry on, carry on, carry on.
Well, I was going to bring up MOCA. I don't want to get too far afield from non-arguable goals and core values, but MOCA is a conversational framework that I learned from Stephen Sloan at the Humane Leadership Institute. It stands for motivation, opportunity, clarity, and ability. With those four things, any individual can improve their own communication about what they're doing at work. It's kind of a performance, call it a performance jig. But you don't have to teach everybody in the company if I'm in order for it to work. So this is what I think is uniquely unique about what we're teaching. And I say that intentionally, uniquely unique. A lot of the kind of cultural excellence workshops that people will go to and communication workshops like disc training and things like that, you learn a lot, but they're very hard to operationalize because you go to a workshop for one day or 4 times in a month, and then you go back to work. And it's really easy to go back into your old habits. And it's also not uncommon for people to take that kind of training and then go back to the workplace and use it as a hammer instead as a communication tool. With Mocha, you can actually start using those words to describe your own spot in a business to yourself without anybody knowing about it. It can be incredibly personal. And when you start talking about things you're doing, uh, someone might ask you, I'll give you an example. Your boss might say, "Hey, I need you to take on this additional project." And you can say, "Hey, I'm totally motivated to do that. I love it. And it's really clear what you want me to do because we've been talking about it. And I totally know how to do it. But let me just be clear. I have a job right now, and you're giving me 50% more job. And I, so I don't know if I'm going to have the opportunity to do this. So as my manager, how are you going to help me manage this workload and give me the opportunity to actually succeed at this new task? Because now I have 1.5 jobs." And you get to say that it's a mutual conversation. It gets rid of the annual review when done right, and you get to have teachable moments at every moment. Whenever you're talking to a coworker, you can look at somebody and say, "Hey, it looks like you're not very motivated to do that. Why is that?" "Yeah, I'm not really clear on what I'm supposed to be doing, so I feel like I'm winging it." Great. So that's the very personal part of it. I think makes it very special. You can also take a team of people and teach them. And in my experience, whether you take a team or you take one person, you get what we call in America the prairie dog effect, which is where people pop up out of their holes and, "Hey, what are you guys doing over there?" And you keep using Mocha or motivation. I hear these words over and over again. Why are you guys always talking like that? And it just sort of spreads across the company like that. It's pretty unique, and it's very hard to be used as a hammer. As something negative.
Absolutely. There is so much to learn about all these things from you, Steve. And I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of conscious leaders would want to learn from you and learn how to do all these things. So, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
At the website, thegloballyconsciousleader.com, we have myself and half a dozen other instructors, and we have courses that are there available for free. We also have fairly inexpensive coaching services for people who want to actually work on operationalizing the ideas of Mocha and leadership and whatnot. And therefore, they're for the janitor, they're for the person who wants to be a manager, they're for the middle manager. They're done as sort of mini mastermind groups so that you could potentially be sitting with the CEO in a group. You might be like the art director for a company and you want to be the marketing manager and you don't know how to get that. You might be sitting with the CEO of another company who can give you some advice. So they're set up not only to help you create organizational excellence, but on a personal level, you could come into one of these workshops, spend a couple $100s a month for 12 months and be ready for a $30,000 a year raise in America, or its equivalent in another country. So it's a way to invest in yourself. I'd say go to the Globally Conscious Leader and check those out. Yeah, you can reach out to me there.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining
Thank you.
us.
Thank you, Ajay. Appreciate it.